Side view is okay, but I prefer the head-on view.
All right, it's Thursday, April 25th, 2019. This is a meeting of the Finance, Appropriation, and Advisory Committee. First order of business is pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, everybody should have the minutes of our last meeting. It was a brief meeting. Everybody have those minutes? There's a meeting just for the oversight of the snow and ice account. Anybody wants to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, of January 30th. Oh, that's right.
Second it.
All right, we have a second. Any changes to the minutes at all? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And now we will discuss the fiscal year 2020 budget. So everybody should have the budget in front of you. Hopefully you've done a little bit of work on it. And what I'll have is, Greg, do you want to take us through some of your numbers here?
I do. So, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm Greg Dudley, the town administrator. And the good news is we have a balanced budget, but it was not without some pain, and you've heard me say that for the last 4 years. The budget is never easy, and the thought is that the $1,544,000 that we voted for the school override would relieve us of any and all pain, but what we find is that some of our fixed costs have gone up, and the amount of money that we raise on a reoccurring basis, new money, is pretty modest. So it's only about, I have the total revenue growth for next year of $440,515. So it's less than $500,000, and that's pretty consistent with the number, give or take, a little bit over the years. So if you could maybe turn to page two, before we talk about expenses, I'd like to walk you through the revenues so you have an understanding, and if there's something you don't understand, please jump in and ask a question. So the first piece, A, taxation, that shows the amounts that we have coming as a result of our 2.5 limit, which you see here, $295,513. So that puts us at the Prop 2.5 levy, which is presumed where we're going to be for fiscal year 2020. The amount of budgeted for new growth is $125,000. And just so you know that the average 5-year new growth in Dudley has been $123,643. So it's not magic in terms of where that number comes from. It could be more, it could be less, but that's the number that we have for the purpose of setting the budget. The amount that you see next is the override, and there is no override for this year, despite what you may have read in the Webster Times a week ago that said the town was putting an override on the ballot to balance the budget, and that's not true. And then lastly, you see the amount under line number 6 for debt and capital exclusions, and that number is $1,548,263. And the reason why that number is down is we see some debt dropping off the books. There's money for the schools. Majority of this is regional school capital money that's coming off the books. So as we normally do, when you have a debt exclusion, we make the promise that the money gets added, and when the debt is retired, that money falls off the books and you don't have to pay it anymore. So, and then there's a little bit of money that was for a police cruiser that was here that is also coming off the books. So the total amount of revenue that we have through taxation, when you add up all the pluses and minuses, we have a little bit less money, about $18,000 less than we would have had a year ago. And again, that's primarily due to the change in the debt exclusion. The next section, B, is estimated receipts. And we use the most available or most recent number that comes out on state aid. And that's primarily lottery aid. So the state used to give out money. It used to be called lottery aid. It's now called unrestricted aid. And there's a very modest increase in that. And so the amount that's projected is $2,111,990. You may wonder about what happens with Chapter 70, because we hear Chapter 70 being talked about all the time. So Chapter 78 goes directly to the regional school. It doesn't pass through the town's books, it goes directly to the schools, and the schools utilize that to offset their budget. So there's a small amount in Chapter 70 that's here, but that's here primarily to offset the cost of our out-of-district regional vocational students who go to faraway places. A little bit of Chapter 70 money that comes to the town for that. The amount that we have for local estimated receipts is $2,964,256. We're pretty conservative, and we've been pretty conservative with estimated receipts. And the primary increase in estimated receipts is typically motor vehicle excise tax. So the largest line item that we have in Dudley for local estimated receipts would be motor vehicle excise tax. And what we typically do is we typically look to increase that line item by about 2% a year. There are other line items, the selectman questioned me on this if you were watching the meeting. There are other line items that if you look at the revenues to date, you might say they could go higher. But I also feel that coming in with low estimates and then exceeding those estimates results in us receiving free cash. And so that type of budget planning is necessary to have an amount that's available for free cash that gets certified in the fall. And that's money that gets dispersed toward the budget, but most of it goes toward capital needs that the town does have. So I would caution against increasing estimated receipts so that we can go ahead and increase the budget accordingly. Enterprise fund revenues, $1,930,000. So this is money that the water and sewer departments collect, and this money directly offsets their expenditures. 100% of what's collected goes toward water and sewer costs, but for an amount that goes toward indirect costs. So we collect something called indirect costs. So when you have an enterprise fund, you're required to determine what the costs are that come on the town side of the budget, and then back charge the water and sewer departments for those costs. So for the next fiscal year, the amount of indirect costs is about $80,000 for the water department and $80,000 for the sewer department. And that's the money that the treasurer looks at every year, and he goes ahead and he calculates that number. And that number gets presented to the water and sewer commissioners, who then, we then go through another round of justifying and documenting what things are done. So the indirects, to answer questions, are a piece of my time as a town administrator and the chief procurement officer, a piece of the treasurer's office, including Rich's salary, some of the costs, proportional costs for this building. In return, the water and sewer department also receives a credit for providing hydrant service to the town. So the fire hydrants are owned and maintained by the water department, and where credit is given to the water and sewer department. So again, we depend upon that indirect money to come into the town. If you could look at item C, available funds, the budget anticipates that we'll utilize $30,740 in free cash and $137,120 from stabilization fund. We had a much larger amount that we utilized from free cash a year ago. That amount of money is not there this year to offset the budget. So the amount that you see for FY20 represents the total that we have available to us. And then the amount in the stabilization fund is an amount that's necessary to kind of bring the budget into balance. If you look at the very bottom of the page, you'll see balance of stabilization fund after town meeting is still projected to be $100,000, and that will need to be addressed going into fall town meeting with providing some additional funding. The other items that are here are pretty much self-explanatory in terms of, you see where we account for the indirects under item number 4A, and you can see how that's increased in accordance with what the town costs are. That number tracks along. As town costs increase, indirect costs also increase. So the total amount available in all revenues is $21,134,515. On the expenditure side, we expect that our costs will go up modestly, about $200,000 from a year ago. I think I mentioned to you before I talk a little bit about revenues or expenses, we have about $440,000 in new revenues. So if you are to consider some of these key items that increase, our Bay Path assessment is up by $118,832. That's a lot of money. And especially when you've got $440,000 to spread amongst all the departments, be it with a $118,000 increase, almost $119,000 is a lot. And you say, why? Because the reason why is there are 19 additional new students enrolling in Bay Path for the next year. So what typically happens is the Bay Path has been very good in terms of only asking their communities to come up with what's called minimum required contribution, and that's what they're doing. But the shift in population means that a greater share of Bay Path's budget has to be paid by Dudley. So there's 19 new students. That shifts costs from some of the other communities to Dudley. And we have to pay that bill as a result of 19 new students. You may ask, how does the student enrollment look at Dudley Charlton? And that's down. So their enrollment for Dudley's portion of students is down. But unlike Bay Path, the formula is a little bit more complex in terms of getting to the bottom line in their budget. And just because there's a decrease in students doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a decrease in costs. And as you've heard that very well. So the other 119 for Bay Path. The Worcester Regional Retirement Assessment is up $76,675. And group insurance, which is the town's health insurance, is up $57,397. So if you total up all of those items, they come to about $253,000, which 253 subtracted from 440 means we've got a little bit under $200,000 to be used for everything else. And that's kind of the bottom line on the budget. Take your revenues, take away your big fixed costs, your big fixed pieces, and that's what you have for every other department in town, including the schools. So that's kind of how we are, where we're at. I do want to mention on health insurance, due to Rich's efforts, we have a 0% increase in our health insurance, and the treasurer and the insurance advisory committee got together and did some plan design changes, and those plan design changes result in a 0% increase, which is really significant because other communities are going through large increases. But what this number shows is we have people who are retiring, and under Mass General Law, retirees are entitled to remain on the insurance. And those retirees are being replaced by new employees. So what happens is costs aren't going up, but the population is going up slightly. So the budget needs to be increased a little bit to catch up with those new employees who are coming on board and the old employees or the retirees who are already on the plan. So that's just the reason as to why health insurance, when there's a 0% increase, still ticks up a little bit. But I think the number is really pretty modest and pretty good compared to where it could be. Rich, I don't know if you want to talk about health insurance at all?
You hit the nail on the head.
Thanks. Figure out, go out with some style. So that's kind of it on that page, and I apologize because I kind of covered a lot of ground. I had to make about $186,000 in reductions because as much as the departments try and they want to come in as low as they possibly can, we can't cram all of those requests to that $440,000 that we have available. So we made about $186,000 in reductions. And the next page, which is, not the next page, but it's not there. Let's see. There was a page there that seems to be missing. Give me a second. So if you turn all the way to the, let's see, 1, 2, go 3 pages from the back, and you're looking for a document that's called Appendix A. Let me know when you find it. Everyone there?
Mhm.
So Appendix A shows the reductions. I mentioned, I think I said 186, I was misquoted. It's $166,827 in reductions. That's what was reduced from what was requested. And as you go through the column on the right-hand side saying difference in request versus recommended, you see for the most part, we tried to give departments what they wanted, but in some case, there were some reductions that were necessary to balance out the budget. So if there was a vacant position, as is in the case with one position in the highway department, we didn't fill it. So that's the reason why you see some of the numbers that are here. And there were some other reductions that were made to bring the budget into balance. And again, those will be things that we typically consider in the fall, at fall town meeting, and I'm sure the new town administrator will walk you through that process. Things that are in the budget that you might want to make note of. So all of the contractual obligations that the town has are fully funded. So we have 3 unions. We have the police, we have the fire, and we have water, sewer, and highway is the 3rd union. So all of those contractual obligations get funded, and the amount that goes toward funding those increases is not insignificant. We've also budgeted a cost of living increase for our non-union employees, and the amount of that cost of living increase that's included in each of these departmental budgets is 2%. If you go through and you pull out that 2% increase, because you may say, how much is it? It comes to about $12,000. Not a heck of a lot of money, but my experience is that we've been making pretty good progress in trying to increase some of the pay of our employees. And that 2% really kind of goes toward the inflationary issue and addresses some of the discrepancies with pay. So I would caution and urge you to try to leave that money in there, because it is important to the town to attract and retain the best and the brightest, and I think we do a pretty good job. On average, we pay about 90% of average. So if you look at comparable communities, you look at our surrounding towns, and you look at other towns that are similar to Dudley demographically, we use the saying, we call it the 90% rule. So we try to pay about 90% of average, because that's what we can afford, and that's what the taxpayers in Dudley seem to enjoy. So the budget kind of continues that. Separate positions that come in for any position now that wants to be reclassified has to come to the town administrator, who's now the personnel director, and then has to go to the personnel board with an affirmative recommendation of the personnel director. So there's a system in place to kind of keep costs down to the best way we possibly can. If you look at the amounts that are here that are shown in the budget and some of the major areas, you may be drawn to the Veterans Services account. So of the cut that's shown here, the most of that is due to the fact that we have a 19-hour-a-week Veterans Director, and he put in the budget that he wanted to be a full-time position. And I had proposed to the selectmen that rather than making the position full-time, we look at maybe joining a veterans district. So one of the opportunities that's available to Dudley and any other community is to join up with another community and create a district, which would ensure that we would receive equal or better services and not necessarily pay full price, because we'd be sharing costs. So that's the reason for that. It's not meant to be anti-veteran. It's meant to kind of get to the bottom line on the budget. And the other veterans benefits have been tracking at a rate where we feel as though it doesn't necessarily need to be funded at the amount that was being requested. Schools, Dudley Charlton. So Dudley Charlton, when the override was voted last April, had committed that they were going to do a 2-year override or a multi-year override. And so the amount that you see here of $8,780,840 reflects the second year of their commitment to the override. There are no buried or hidden costs in there. If you look at that budget again and you say, well, it's gone down, you would be correct. It's gone down because of the fact that the debt exclusion that the town is retiring off the books is also reflected that the schools aren't including that number in their budget. So the town raises the money, and that money goes to the schools, and when that debt is retired, the schools no longer budget for it, and the town no longer budgets for it. So again, it again proves the value of a debt exclusion that's here only for a limited period of time, and then it comes off the books. So the total amount of the budget, general fund in schools is recommended at $18,885,676. That's a little bit less, or just, excuse me, yeah, it's just a little bit less than where you are this year. So if you look at the left-hand column, you see that it's $18,960,907. So it's a little bit less. So a little bit less means that taxes will go down. They will go down under this scenario. And I had proposed to the selectmen, and I thought it was a pretty good idea, that we take some of the debt for this building, because we have a roof, and we have the new air conditioning system that we put in a year ago, and the roof's going on right now. I thought it was a pretty good idea that we, since we're retiring school debt, it made a good idea to replace it with new debt and do a debt exclusion. The selectmen didn't want to do that. So the proposal was made. I won't speak for the treasurer, but we thought it was a pretty good idea to do this. The amount that it would, the amount on the taxpayer is modest, is very, very modest. I did the calculation, and if you did a 5-year pay down on $450,000 in debt, say $500,000 in debt, the cost to the average resident is about $25 a year. But the board said no, and that's their right. They have to approve putting it on the ballot. They didn't put it on the ballot, but I still think it's a good idea. And so, you know, to take this debt, it wasn't good timing a year ago because we had to get the override passed, and that had to stand alone by itself. But it didn't go through. So when we're sitting here in a year wondering why our debt costs have gone up, now you know why. Other than that, if you look at the enterprise funds on the bottom of this page, it does show the increases in the enterprise fund budgets. But since the enterprise fund is run by fees, that cost does not fall on the taxpayers. The cost that falls on the taxpayers is $18,914,020. And so that's the amount that the taxpayers would pay. So that's a quick overview of the budget. We can go through if there's any questions that you have on terms of the big macro level review. I'm happy to answer those. If you want to go back to the beginning again and turn to page 3. So page 3 is kind of a nice little summary of funding sources for FY20. And it's good because it shows you the amount in taxation, real property taxes and personal taxes. It shows you the amount of new growth, the amount of debt exclusions, state aid, free cash. Overlay surplus, we have none. Stabilization fund, we're using a little bit. Draw your attention to the overlay surplus because in the past we've had overlay surplus and we've applied some of it toward the budget. This year, we don't have any of it available. And it's things like that that make the budget a little bit tighter. And then you see on the next going down, water and sewer revenues, which is enterprise fund, water and sewer indirect costs, and then any additional amount that's coming from an override. And there's no override. This budget has no override. So then it's less assessments, state and county regional charges, cherry sheet, snow and ice, and we set aside money for tax abatements. So the $100,000 that you see there represents an amount that we budget for. When people come in and apply for abatements, we need a source of funds to be able to pay those abatements. So we're required by law to set up something called an overlay account, which is under the control and jurisdiction of the Board of Assessors. And as tax abatements are approved, that money is then drawn from the overlay account so that we don't create a deficit in any of our other accounts. So the total revenues, less assessments, is $20,986,200. $762, and that is, if you take the general budget and you take the enterprise budget, and you get to the part that says difference, shows you that we balance. So we're there, but not without some pain. And I'm sure the department heads are here to tell you about what their needs are. And if you have questions, I can answer them. If not, I would defer to them and any questions you may have on their budgets. That's it.
Any questions for Greg?
Thank you.
So, any questions? So Greg, we're gonna need, in order to budget, balance this budget, we're gonna have to pull the 137 out of stabilization to
Yeah.
do this, even though our budget went down?
Yeah, so we've done it before. We've gotta replace it with money in the fall, because we're trying to make slow progress in building it. But there's no, because of that debt exclusion coming off the books, and the increases in our fixed costs, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We've done it before, but we need to hold true with a commitment to fund it in the fall.
So we're gonna pull out of stabilization. This debt, these two debt exclusions come off, and the selectmen were adamant on not,
It was a split vote. So they just said no. They feel as though, I mean, they're out there in contact with the public, and the public has told them that they pay enough in taxes, and part of it is due to the fact that when the third quarter tax bill came out around Christmas time, what people saw was a big increase because it was a catch-up. So you're catching up for the first 2 quarters that you paid based upon last year's tax bill, and they saw, and it was hard to get people to pay attention after that point. Everyone kind of put up a wall, but what should happen, and Mr. Carmignani can tell you, is that the bills come out in August should be less. But I leave that to him.
so, to get it straight,
Yeah,
the selectmen got yelled at,
yeah, the selectmen were not comfortable.
and therefore, we're gonna put ourselves in serious
Yeah, I
financial
think-
position
I
here
think-
because
I think-
the selectmen got
I think
yelled
the
at.
plan that the capital
Okay.
committee has had and the treasurer has had is a good one, that you do these things, you pay for them, you do relatively quick pay downs, and you budget these things, and you get it off your books as quick as possible. And again, the increase to the average homeowner, the average home is $255,252. So the average homeowner increase is about $25 a year.
In our budget, what is, we just put the roof on,
What is that?
we just did the project for the roof.
Yeah, so the roof was $364,000.
We did the air conditioning
Air
system.
conditioning was about 101, so our total budget for those was $450,000. We got a really good bid on the roof, and we had to go for it. So we pulled some money from some of our other budgets to be able to sign a contract. And so we're getting a 25-year roof. On this building, it's 90% done as we sit here right now. And we will be as good as gold for the next 25 years. So yeah, so that's exactly what we did. Those are the costs.
And we get the LED lights.
So the LED lights are gonna, yeah, and I'm glad you gave me the microphone. LED lights will start going in the beginning, middle part of next month.
Okay.
So the LED lights will be paid for too, but the nice thing about the LED lights is it shouldn't cost us any more money, because what should happen is the savings, we should continue to budget our street lights the way we do today. But the cost of the LED lighting will be a fraction of what the regular lighting is. So that money that's set aside to pay for electricity can be transferred into the debt budget to
Right.
pay for the cost of the LED lights.
But how much is in the budget to pay for these?
200,000 for the LED?
Are we paying down any of these expenses?
No,
Anywhere in the budget?
only interest, because we had predicted that, with the board, we thought that this thing was gonna be a green light for the debt exclusion.
Anybody have any other questions? School budget, so that stayed level funded? I thought there was room, we were possibly talking
Yeah,
about
so
a
they
minimum.
took out, they had some additional positions when we went up there and met with them, and they removed those positions.
So we're not going over with an additional minimum?
No, no additional
So,
minimum.
so the budget was set?
Yeah, so there's
Remember, that
no,
was part of the,
so what we were doing is we were paying a little bit above what we were required, so we're continuing to pay that little piece, but it's not increasing.
that's gonna hit us next year. Was it a
Yeah,
two-year rollout?
so next year, I think the schools have said that their budget growth is somewhere around $1.2 million a year. Just normal budget growth.
Right.
And if you consider that Dudley and Charlton, we both have limited revenues, you know, we only have $450,000 in revenues, and Charlton maybe a little bit more than that. So it's gonna create an issue, but you also have a new superintendent who's coming on board, July 1st. And I'm sure you will have many meetings with that new superintendent about what the town of Dudley can afford to pay.
Okay. Any questions for Greg? Rich, you wanna add anything?
Good summary of things. I'm disappointed. I think we had an opportunity to go through for a modest increase. The increase that went around was significant this year. If anything, you're paying for what you should have been paying for 10 years ago. We've just kicked the can down the street. So I sort of saw it as more of a correction to the tax rate rather than a, we should have been paying that all the way along. And the roof, it's not, you know, not putting in moon roofs for everybody here. These were necessary,
Yeah,
necessary upgrades.
There was significant leaking in the building. So if you come up to the third floor, you'll see the ceiling tiles are pulled down. This is a really nice building, and what happens is water gets into the building, it creates mold, and it creates other problems. So what we wanted to do is we didn't want to get to that stage, which is the reason why we decided not to go with a repair. We go with a full roof replacement. We buy a quality product that's warranted, fully warranted, and installed correctly, and that's what we've done. So hopefully the residents will appreciate that.
Could you explain the veterans' position?
Yeah, so the veterans' position is 19 hours a week, and there's a secretary in the office that I think is 12 hours a week. So there's two positions. They're here a couple of days a week. And the veterans director had put in for an amount of money to bring his budget up to full-time veterans director. And just find that. Yeah, so the cost of a full-time director would be $45,000. And the amount that's budgeted for the director in 2020 is $24,706. So that includes 19 hours a week plus a 2% COLA. And then on the veterans' benefits, the proposed number was 200,000. It was reduced to 160,000 based upon what we think the run rate for that would be. Dudley is in kind of a unique position. So we're a little bit under 12,000 people, and when the community reaches 12,000 in population, you have two choices. You can either have a full-time veterans director, or you can become part of a regional district. So part of the thinking on the regional district is in anticipation at some point we'll reach that 12,000 population figure. But we also feel that with a regional district, we can provide the same number of hours in-house that's being provided today. And then the people can go to whatever other community that's part of the district on days when the Dudley office is not open. So we think it's a workable plan, Jerry.
Thank you.
So the total drop in those overrides was exactly how much?
So,
What is, and what is that, what are those, both of those overrides bring in per
you mean
year?
the debt exclusions?
The debt exclusion, excuse me.
Yeah, Rich has.
Tons of paper except the one you need, right?
True, Richard, true.
What we have for this year, 1,987,098. To move forward with just the status quo, nothing new. The next step on all of the debt payments or the assessments from the schools drops us to 1,548,263. So 1,548 from 1,987.
438,
Yep.
835.
Okay. What was thrown out there as a potential middle ground was 1649.13. So the debate is 1649.13 versus the 1548,263. Quick numbers, $100,000-ish over 4,500 tax
So-
bills. or whatever.
438 dropped off. How much does that represent? In terms of per thousand? Idea? How much sense that is?
I didn't have that. Greg had independently come up with the $25.
So if 100 is worth $25, so.
On average, for the average house.
On the average house, so a little bit over $100?
Is it that much?
438.
Yeah, 438. So if 100 grand totals an increase of $25, so 438 should be 100, just over $100.
So everybody's gonna get an average decrease of $100.
That's right.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when we do the recap sheet, what's above and beyond 2.5 and new growth and the override, that amount is going to decrease by the $400,000. So you're also backing into that. You never know. We have a dollar amount for new growth onto that.
I'm just trying to,
In addition,
I'm
the
just trying to
2.5 is going-
simplify the debt popping off, what kind of effect it has, paying that off.
It's $100,000 on the, and it's $25, so reasonably, it's $6 plus every time you come to visit me at the town hall and pay it. Which is modest. I mean, $25, 50 cents a week.
Well,
It gives us
You know-
breathing room, and I think strategically, it's the way to go through and do that.
well, we've got two major things on there that we're not really paying for. Correct?
You would think that the repairs done to this building would be pretty visible. It's not like the money is hidden away.
Right.
It's not like we're paying our OPEB liability or something like that, we're paying money to preserve an asset that was previously approved by a debt exclusion by the voters of the town. And I have to say this about Dudley, there's not many, this is a really nice building, so people walk in here and they like it, and we try hard to keep it up, and there are costs in doing so. So we replaced the roof, we replaced the HVAC, the chiller unit, not the whole thing, but the chiller. We replaced the power storage system in the building because that was gone. So that's $500,000 in improvements just in the last 3 years on this building, and, you know, I would hope that that would continue into the future. Really do.
Any other questions?
What?
As far as time goes, the selectmen had their one vote on it, and they
Yeah,
signed the
so
warrant.
it takes like a two-thirds vote of the Board of Selectmen, so a 2-2. It had to be 4. It had to be all 4 that had to agree to it. Because 2/3 of 4 is 3 and a fraction. So when there's a fraction, it becomes, you gotta go up. So I was kind of surprised, but I've learned in this business, there are things that are administration, there are things that go to the policymakers, and that was clearly a policymaker question. We gave it a try.
Well, it just kind of puts the town in a bind. I mean, we got equipment to buy, and we're gonna be waiting now until,
Well, that's
again, till the supplemental budget to see if there's a nickel
That's the thing, is this would have taken that number off the books, which would have freed up
freed up.
available money to fund their requests.
And the opposition to that was, they got yelled at.
I don't want to speak for them.
Okay. I don't want to start a fight with the selectmen, but.
My board's been good to me, so, you know, I respect their
Mhm.
position.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Does anybody have any questions for the departments? Nothing? All right.
The good news is they're not complaining
Yeah, that's true.
or screaming, which is, I think, something we've kind of worked toward and minimize that.
Any thoughts on the water and sewer projects, you know?
Yeah, so there's gonna be a, you mean the capital stuff, or are you talking about the reorganization into a DPW?
Well, we can talk about both.
So the reorganization is gonna go to town meeting. So it requires an affirmative vote of town meeting to continue. It's gonna be done in the form of special act legislation. So the entire special act legislation is done, and it actually will be in the warrant, and I think it's 3 or 4 pages, but it is what it is. You're gonna ask people to vote on a complex reorganizational plan. There should be a cost savings resulting from that. Simple fact is you're taking, 2 years ago, there was a separate water, separate sewer, and a separate highway superintendent, and you're combining those into one position. And a portion of that salary will be paid for by water and sewer users, so it's a cost that's not under the taxation, it's paid for by the residents. And the report surmises that staffing in the department is sufficient to create a DPW. So that's saying, we create a DPW and add 5 more people. So, just by that alone and the fact that they can share equipment and services, there should be a cost savings, and I've got to kind of put pen to paper and come up with that number for town meeting, but I can tell you, it's there. If it gets approved by town meeting, it then goes to Boston, and hopefully our legislative delegation can assist in getting that enacted into law. The goal would be, if that takes place, then we have town meeting in the fall. So the way it's worded is 60 days after it's enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor, the DPW becomes effective within 60 days. So there's a little bit of a transition period, because one thing we learned is there are communities that didn't do that, and it gets passed into law, and the next day they're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So it allows time for the selectmen to hire a DPW director. The selectmen will be the appointing authority for the DPW director. The town administrator and the director will be the hiring authority for staff. So there'll be a water and sewer advisory board. It'll be consisting of 3 members. The terms of the elected water and sewer commissioners will cease. So the 3 members will be responsible for recommendation on the annual operating budget, recommendation on the capital budget for water and sewer, and then thirdly, they would be making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for water and sewer rates. So the selectmen would become your water and sewer commissioners or public works commissioners. They then act on the recommendation of the advisory board. I can tell you, just read through the proposal. I think it's pretty comprehensive. If people want to do it, this is a good opportunity to do so, because we have interims in all of our departments. So Mr. Paletta is acting in an acting role. We appreciate his work. He's done a great job. And George Petrinos is the acting water and sewer superintendent. So those people are in acting positions, kind of waiting for this thing to happen. So you'll have an opportunity at town meeting in the fall to true up the budget. And by being true up the budget, you don't need to appropriate any more monies, but monies kind of need to be moved around by town meeting vote to achieve the desired impact of a DPW. So don't lose sight of the fact that needs to happen. So hopefully the legislation will be enacted if it gets approved by town meeting in time for fall town meeting. You go to fall town meeting, you create a consolidated Department of Public Works. It's up to you in terms of whether you want to keep a separate water and sewer budget. There will be a DPW oversight committee. So one of the things that's not in the legislation, but the selectmen feel as though to kind of make this process work, you want to have a committee of residents and employees and staff who will be on an oversight committee, will help the transition process between three independent, acting alone, standalone departments into a single department. So that's where that stands, and I expect that there'll be some opposition, but this is either the third or fourth time that Dudley has talked about a DPW. But this time, we've actually got something that we can agree on, and we've got it written down in paper. Have we got every possible scenario figured out? No, because you can't anticipate every possible scenario. And I'm guessing those are the type of questions that will come up at town meeting to thwart the effort and to make it look as though there wasn't a great deal of thought given to the whole process. But I can assure you, we paid $20,000, $19,000 for a consultant to come in and write a report. The consultant talked to everybody, made himself available to the water and sewer commissioners to talk. One commissioner showed up for that meeting, not a whole bunch. And then the water sewer commissioners came in and met with the Board of Selectmen and said that they didn't have an opportunity to speak to the consultant. So, there's only so much you can do. You know what I'm saying? There's only so much you can possibly do. So that's on the docket. Other items, water and sewer budget.
Well,
Questions?
capital improvement was looking at their 5-year plans for water and sewer. And there's a lot coming up. And we approved just about everything on those 5-year plans. And we're looking, speaking with Rich, looking at ways to make this all one big project and get the financing for that one big project.
Yeah, I mean, I just, here's kind of my thought. I'm leaving. You've got a new director that hasn't been hired yet. You got a new town administrator that's supposed to be, and to me, I don't understand the rush to jam all of this stuff through and get it spend down the retained earnings, which makes, to me, no sense. I mean, I wouldn't spend down the retained earnings. I would leave half of the retained earnings that are there, because remember, we're still a participant in the regional wastewater treatment plant with the town of Webster. And they send us a bill every year. And I always like to say that maybe that bill is, maybe they'll find that we sent more stuff through the pipe than we got billed for. I always like to say that some of the money should be kept, just in case. But I wouldn't go hog wild unless it was borrowing. I wouldn't go hog wild.
Well,
with
I think
spending down
that's
retained
one
earnings.
of the issues is, if you take this piecemeal, they're gonna spend down their retained earnings down to nothing.
Well, that wouldn't be good.
Right. So that's why we
And I would-
kind
and I
of
would
lumped this all together.
I would
into-
strongly advise against that, because to me, that's kind of a reckless pattern to say we're gonna spend the money and you're gonna be stuck with all the problems.
Right, so even if they go a year or two. and-
I
and
couldn't
pay
think of a
small
better reason to vote
projects.
for a DPW if that were the board that were making that recommendation. To me, I couldn't think of a better reason to vote for a DPW than that.
Okay. Any questions?
My 2 cents.
Okay.
Conservatism is the way that you work. Keep your retained earnings, prioritize your projects, and you'll have a new director that comes on board. Give that director an opportunity to prioritize projects and come in to meet with you.
No other question? Okay. Okay. So Greg, do you need a preliminary vote here on?
So what we're gonna do is, I do. We have to have a warrant article information hearing coming up. So that's the opportunity where we go through each and every article in excruciating detail. We discuss it, and then you formulate your recommendation on those. But I would ask you to support the budget FY '20 as recommended in the amount of $21,134,516. And that would include money for enterprise funds also.
Which number, which figure did you have?
This one, right?
The 21,515? Anybody have any other questions before we take a vote? Fine. No questions? No? Anybody want to make a motion to go ahead on this? Go ahead. So you have a motion
The
for?
motion to support the budget as recommended in the amount of $21,134,516, which includes the enterprise funds.
Just what Michelle said. Anybody second that?
That's it.
Yep, second that.
Well, any one of these? You already made the motion. Somebody's gonna get a second it.
Who's seconding?
I second
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
All right, any more discussion on that budget? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
I want to thank you for your support. I've really enjoyed
Well,
working here.
it's been easy since you've been here, Greg.
This has been my,
Putting these budgets
swan song here, and this will be my last town meeting, so thank you. Dudley is a nice place in my heart. Really enjoyed the town.
Thank you very much.
I've
and,
enjoyed the people, too. It's been a great spot.
Yeah, you've done a great job putting it together, nice and easy, and we know where the money is, and we know.
Just kind
spend on it,
of talk without any notes for half an hour.
So, we appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a good go, and I know that the person that's coming on board will give it his full effort also. And I'm only a text message away.
Well, you'll get a few. Okay. What else is on the agenda here? All right, any miscellaneous items? Anyone? Anything? Miscellaneous? So I guess we're gonna meet with the selectmen next to
Right.
go over the whole warrant. When are they meeting?
May 6th?
Don't we usually meet a little bit before, like at 6?
Yeah, if you want.
It might make sense that night we kind of keep the selectmen's business, maybe we start at 7.
What's the date of the town meeting?
20th,
20?
May 20th.
May 20th? And so they're meeting, you said May 6th?
I think so. I think it's a Monday.
Yeah, 6.
It's a Monday.
May 6th,
6. Can we meet at like 6?
6 o'clock?
It'll be a joint meeting. We'll just go through the warrant.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody? Good?
We have 36 articles total. There's, in addition to the DPW, there's a couple of other things that are of interest. There's zoning, but that's not really of any concern to this board.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, anything else miscellaneous? Entertain a motion to adjourn here? Anybody?
We adjourn.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.